The Hawkeyes are hosting the Badgers, and Tim Brewster lost his job. This is Incompetent Sports Talk. Welcome to another edition of Incompetent Sports Talk with Mike Rabin and Jake Burgers. I'm Alex Salzma. The Iowa Hawkeyes are coming off a 38-28 win versus Michigan in front of nearly 113,000 people in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Michigan Stadium was rocking, but the Hawkeyes were rocking on offense as they scored 38 points, which was the most ever by an Iowa team versus Michigan. Ricky Stanzi, Big Ten Player of the Week on offense the first time this year. That an Iowa offensive player has been named Big Ten Player of the Week. And Darrell Johnson-Culiano's setting some records, Mike.
Absolutely. I think the big difference in this ballgame is the turnover battle. Michigan on the scoreboard, 522 yards of offense to Iowa's only 374. So clearly Michigan had the favor there. But 4 turnovers for Michigan, 0 turnovers for Iowa. Very reminiscent of 2009 when Michigan had 5 turnovers and Iowa had 1 turnover in Kinnick Stadium, and that was really the big difference in the ballgame. There's a lot of accolades to go around. Darrell Johnson-Culianos has the most receiving yards for a wide receiver in Iowa football history. And then Adam Robinson, what a tremendous performance from him. 143 yards on the ground, 68 yards receiving. What a tremendous job from him. He's really going to be the workhorse throughout the rest of Big Ten play, and he really got off to a really good start against Michigan in the Big House.
Jake.
Well, it was great to see DJK break the all-time receiving yards record at Iowa. He also had 3 touchdowns in the game. That gives him 7 touchdowns on the year. His freshman, sophomore, and junior season, he had 7 touchdowns total, so he's already matched that total this year. Ricky Stanzi's putting up huge numbers. Our defense had its first bad game of the year, I think, giving up over 500 yards of offense to Michigan. We also gave up a lot of points to Arizona, but that was due in large part to special teams. But going into the fourth quarter, we had only given up 7 points to Michigan. They scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, led by Tate Forcier. That was a little disheartening to see. But as long as we pull out the win at Michigan, that's not easy to do. I'm going to be happy.
That's right. And some things I took away from this game, I thought Iowa showed a lot of guts. They're 35-28, hit some big third down conversions to get that drive, to get up the field goal. And how about Michael Meyer? Everybody in that stadium screaming on top of their lungs. He goes in. Granted, it wasn't like it was the longest field goal in the world, but to make that field goal sealed the win at 38-28. And, of course, as we talked about, another great day for Ricky Stanzi. And a big development in college football happened over the weekend. The first football coach to be fired in the FBS happened, and it happened in Big Ten country up at Minnesota, as Tim Brewster now is fired after going 1-6 this year. Tim Brewster is now no longer the head coach at the University of Minnesota. Tim Brewster said when he was hired at Minnesota that he would be taking them to Rose Bowls and winning Rose Bowls. But let's look at what he did do or what he didn't do. He never beat a ranked team at Minnesota. He never beat a rivalry team at Minnesota. He never won a bowl game at Minnesota. He never beat an FBS team in the month of November at Minnesota. But one thing he did do was lose to 2 FCS teams. Minnesota fans are probably happy that the Tim Brewster era is over. Mike, you're a Minnesotan. Jake, you're a Minnesotan, so I'd be happy to hear your guys' opinions on this. But first of all, just sum up the Tim Brewster era, and was it right to fire him mid-season like they did? Is that the right move? I'll let you guys take your pick.
Okay, well, yeah, I'll talk about a little bit about what Tim Brewster did at Minnesota. 15-30 overall, 6-21 in the Big Ten, 0-10 in rivalry games. Of course he deserved to be fired. Whether or not he deserved to be fired mid-season or at the end of the year is debatable. I think it is a good move for Minnesota because now they have a head start on the coaches out there who are going to be looking for new jobs. There are some names floating around, and you see what Minnesota did last time when they fired their basketball coach midseason, Dan Munson. They ended up getting Tubby Smith, who at the end of the year, the Iowa job was open, but by that time, Tubby Smith was already going to Minnesota. They got a head start on that. I think now they can get a head start on some other coaches out there before other programs fire their coaches, and there are more job openings. So I do kind of like the timing of this decision with Tim Brewster. I think they knew they were going to fire him at the end of the season anyway. Might as well do it mid-season, get a head start.
Mike, what do you think are some of those other candidates that could be associated with this job?
Well, I've been doing quite a bit of research trying to figure out what kind of guy would be right at Minnesota, and I think there's a couple that come to mind. Leslie Frazier, the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings, has already reportedly expressed interest in the job. He's obviously spent time in the Midwest. He's been the defensive coordinator for the Vikings since 2007, so that could be a development. I think that would be a great choice
definitely.
for Minnesota. And then I think the other big one that I look at is Mark Trestman, and this is someone who maybe a lot of people in the United States don't necessarily know about, but he is the coach for Montreal Alouettes, a Canadian League football team. He was a quarterback at the University of Minnesota for 3 years in the 70s, got a degree from Minnesota in 1979 in political science, and he's done a lot of tremendous things at many different levels of football. And I think someone who graduated from St. Louis Park, Minnesota, has ties to the area, played on the football team in the 70s. I think someone like that who's got inroads in the program would be a good choice. So I think those two guys would be the first two on my list.
And Minnesota's athletic director has also talked about making a big splash. Do those names make a splash to you?
I think Leslie Frazier
Yeah.
absolutely makes a splash. Trestman, maybe not so much, but I think he could be the right guy, have the right philosophy. There's going to be a lot of conversation about Sumlin, too. I don't know if he'll come from Houston. But I don't know if someone will be a splash. It all depends on what your definition. I think it's kind of complex.
To me, too, I mean, a lot of times these programs talk about making a splash, but just get a good coach in there. Kirk Ferentz wasn't really a splash, but is he a good coach? Yeah. And he's built this program into a Big Ten title contender. Jake?
There is one name out there that I think would be a very big splash, and that's Mike Leach, the former coach at Texas Tech. He kind of left Texas Tech on bad terms. He might be a little bit of a name that people might want to stay away with what he did at Texas Tech, but he did lead Texas Tech to great numbers offensively. He'd bring a lot of enthusiasm to the Gopher program, which is much needed. Another name that Iowa fans are familiar with is Dan McCarney, the former coach at Iowa State. Took Iowa State to levels of success they've never had before, and that got him fired. But he's at Florida now. He's doing good things for the Florida defense. He might be another guy that would be looking to get back to the head coaching position.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating, too, because Leach and McCarney have off-the-field issues they would have to deal with if they wanted to get the job at Minnesota. People bring up these issues, and I think I don't know if Minnesota wants to go down that road. I think Leslie Frazier, if they could get him from the Vikings, would be the best choice, and I think they're going to push hard to get him because obviously Tony Dungy already said he's not interested, but he's interested in helping the program find the right head coach.
Yeah, and Leslie Frazier's even been in the talk for a lot of NFL jobs over the last couple of years. He's interviewed for a lot of jobs, and I think it's about time he gets a job. He's done great things for this Minnesota defense. And about Mike Leach was calling the game on CBS College Sports. I was watching the other day, East Carolina and NC State, and he's a terrible commentator. Great coach, terrible commentator. We need to get him on the sidelines and out of the announcer's booth. But hopefully Minnesota, just for the Big Ten's sake, maybe they'll get someone in there who can make them a competitive team. So at least be a little more interesting rivalry again. But regardless, I just hope Iowa continues to be Minnesota. And I am sad that Tim Brewster's gone. I will miss Tim Brewster. I'll miss the fact that we beat them every year he was there, and the fact that the last 2 years they have not scored a point versus Iowa. I'll miss him. I'll miss playforbrew.com. Luckily, that is still up and running. Go to play4brew.com if you want to go to Tim Brewster's recruiting website. But it'll be interesting to see what happens up in Minnesota. They'll probably take a while before they make a choice. BCS polls are out. Oregon is #1 in the human polls, but #2 in the BCS. Oklahoma, #3 in the human polls, but #1 in the BCS. So, of course, anytime the BCS is brought up, there's always going to be debate. So we're going to give you our top 5 BCS teams, and I'll start with mine. #5, I'm going to go with Michigan State. They're the best team in the Big Ten. They're the only unbeaten team left in the Big Ten, and that double-digit win versus Wisconsin is even looking better because Wisconsin just went and beat Ohio State in Camp Randall. I got Michigan State, #5. #4, I'm going to go LSU. They're unbeaten. They're in the best conference in college football, the SEC. They're 7-0 for the first time since 1973, and LSU has the #1 ranked total defense in the SEC. They're ugly, but they're making good progress on the field, and they're just winning games. So I don't care. Style points aren't really a factor for me. #3, Oklahoma. That Florida State win is looking great because they beat them by 30 points. Florida State That's their only loss, and they're right now looking like they're in the driver's seat for the ACC. They got DeMarco Murray, Ryan Broyles. They got a great quarterback in Landry Jones. This is a team that's going to be a contender for the Big 12, and I'd like them to go undefeated until the Big 12 title game. Oregon, number 2. 567 yards a game, 54 points a game. They got a prolific offense. The defense, 22 takeaways, which is number 1 in college football. I'll put them number 2. Number 1, Auburn. They beat a ranked Mississippi State team on the road, or I guess a Mississippi State team that is now ranked, a good Mississippi State team. People are knocking that win earlier in the year. They beat a ranked Arkansas team by 22 points. They beat a ranked South Carolina team, and they beat a quality Clemson team. Cam Newton, he's my number 1 for the Heisman right now. There's not a player in college football that is electrifying as him. There's not a player that means more to his team than Cam Newton right now. They're unstoppable on offense. I like Auburn. I'll take some stop points with that too, because Auburn just is playing incredible football. Auburn, my number 1 team right now. Mike, your top 5.
A little bit of difference from you, some similarities and some differences, but I have Boise State at number 5. I think Kellen Moore and those returning starters are a really good football team, and I think you line Boise State up on a neutral field with any team in the country, they have a shot to win. But again, they play in the WAC. They play such a poor schedule that it's difficult as the season continues to really figure out where they should be. So for now, I'll put them at number 5. Their win against Virginia Tech is looking better. The Oregon State win looked good, but now maybe not so good after Oregon State losing to Washington. At number 4, I have LSU. I'm in agreement. I think LSU just winning ball games, maybe not pretty, but winning the number 1 defense in the SEC. I like them at 4. I have Auburn at number 3, so I'm looking forward to that Auburn-LSU game this weekend. Cameron Newton, a tremendous athlete. 13 passing touchdowns and 12 rushing touchdowns this season. Auburn, not great on defense, but again, winning ball games against some tough opponents. Number 2, I have Oklahoma. I just think they don't necessarily win with style either, but a 52-0 drubbing of Iowa State last week, finally getting back another big win after that dominant performance, 30-point win over Florida State earlier in the season. And number 1, I have Oregon. I just like the way that they've played all season, the way they dominated Stanford and Autzen Stadium. I like Oregon right now in a very competitive Pac-10 as the number 1 team in the country.
Jake.
Well, you two don't have a whole lot of love for the non-BCS teams. I have a little more love than you guys do. At number 5, I'm going with TCU. They have a great offense, great defense, ranks in the top 15 in the country in both. Their offense is led by quarterback Andrew Dalton. They went undefeated last year, lost to Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. No shame in that. I have them at number 4 or number 5. Number 4, I'm going with Auburn. Undefeated in the SEC. Cam Newton's a great quarterback. He probably is the front runner for the Heisman Trophy right now. The only problem I have with Auburn right now is they have the 64th ranked total defense in the country. They have to make some improvements on that side of the ball before I'm going to put them higher. Oklahoma, I have at number 3. They did beat Iowa State by a score of 52-0. They looked very impressive against Florida State. They also beat Texas, but they've been a little inconsistent, beat Cincinnati by just 2 points. Started the year by beating Utah State by just 7. A little too inconsistent for me to put them at 2 or number 1.
You don't like Utah State? They're in the WAC, though. I know you like the WAC.
Well, yeah, that's where my number 2 team in the country comes from, Boise State. They do have a couple quality wins already, Oregon State and Virginia Tech, who creeped into the top 25 in the BCS at number 25 this week. They're already 3-0 in the ACC. That is a quality win for Boise State. I know they had a letdown after their Boise State game, but I'm still giving that credit to Boise State. Later on in the year, Boise State's strength of schedule is going to go way down. They will drop in the BCS, but as of now, I have them number 2. They went 14-0 last year, beat TCU in the Fiesta Bowl. They beat Oregon, who went to the Rose Bowl last year. They have a lot of quality wins. They returned 20 starters from last year. That's why I have them at number 2. Number 1, Oregon, I think they've been the most impressive team in the country so far. They've been winning with style. They have a very explosive offense, number 1 in the country in total offense. The way they beat Stanford, who I think is a top 10 team, I think has been the most impressive win of the season.